The deep state. Two words that can end a dinner party, start a fight, or get you a million views on social media. Say it on the right, and you're talking about shadowy government insiders sabotaging Donald Trump. Say it on the left, and you're an unhinged conspiracy theorist who probably also believes the earth is flat. But here's what neither side wants to admit: they're both wrong, and they're both a little bit right. The deep state is real, it's just not the cartoon villain version you've been sold. And the truth, the actual, documented, boring, infuriating truth, is far more disturbing than any conspiracy theory. Welcome to Context Missing. Today, we're going somewhere uncomfortable. Let's go. Let's start by killing the myth. The QAnon version, the Hollywood version, the version that sells pillow ads and gold coins. In that version, the deep state is a secret cabal of elites, lizard people, Satanists, globalists, pulling strings from underground bunkers. They control elections, assassinate presidents, and have been running the world since at least the Kennedy administration. This version is exciting, it's cinematic, it gives powerless people a villain to point at. And it is almost entirely fiction. Not because power doesn't exist, but because real power doesn't work like a Bond movie. Real power is bureaucratic, it's institutional, it's slow, it's boring, and it doesn't need a secret handshake. The real deep state doesn't meet in underground bunkers. It meets in congressional hearings you don't watch and budget meetings you've never heard of. So where did the term actually come from? Because it wasn't invented by Trump, or QAnon, or Fox News. The phrase deep state, or derin devlet, was coined in Turkey in the 1990s. It described a very specific, very real phenomenon: military officers, intelligence agents, and organized crime figures operating outside civilian government control. Turkish deep state actors were linked to assassinations, drug trafficking, and political manipulation, all documented and prosecuted in court. This wasn't a theory, it was a scandal, with evidence, with convictions, with names. Political scientists picked up the term and applied it more broadly to describe permanent government structures that outlast elected officials. Mike Lofgren, a Republican congressional staffer who served for 28 years, wrote a famous 2014 essay defining the American deep state precisely. He described it as a hybrid of government and top-level finance and industry, effectively able to govern without reference to voters. Not lizard people, bureaucrats, generals, bankers, and lobbyists operating in plain sight. That's the real deep state. To understand the American deep state, you need to understand one thing: the permanent government versus the elected government. Every 4 or 8 years, Americans vote. A new president arrives, new cabinet members, new priorities, new rhetoric. But underneath all of that, about 2 million federal civilian employees don't go anywhere. The CIA doesn't get a new staff when presidents change. Neither does the NSA, the Pentagon, or the Federal Reserve. These institutions have their own cultures, their own agendas, their own institutional memories stretching back decades. And here's the critical point: they have enormous power to shape, delay, or quietly kill the policies of whoever sits in the Oval Office. That's not a conspiracy. That's how bureaucracy works. It's called bureaucratic inertia, and every political scientist knows about it. The question isn't whether this permanent structure exists. It obviously does. The question is, whose interest does it serve? Let's talk about the institution that most embodies the real deep state: the intelligence community. The United States has 18 separate intelligence agencies. 18. The CIA, NSA, DIA, NRO. Most Americans couldn't name 5 of them. Their combined annual budget is classified, but leaked documents put it at roughly $80 billion per year. Per year. They employ hundreds of thousands of people, operate in dozens of countries, and answer, in theory, to elected officials. In practice, the oversight is a polite fiction. Congressional intelligence committees are notoriously under-resourced and often kept in the dark. In 2013, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper lied to Congress, under oath, about NSA mass surveillance of American citizens. He said the NSA did not wittingly collect data on millions of Americans. That was a lie. Snowden's documents proved it weeks later. Clapper was never charged, never prosecuted. He went on to become a CNN national security analyst. Let that sink in. The head of U.S. intelligence lied to Congress about spying on Americans and faced zero consequences. If that doesn't describe a structure operating above democratic accountability, I don't know what does. Now let's talk about the military-industrial complex, because this is where the real money and real power converge. This phrase was coined by President Dwight Eisenhower in his 1961 farewell address. Eisenhower, a five-star general, a war hero, a Republican. He warned Americans about the unwarranted influence of the defense industry over government policy in his own farewell speech. Think about how extraordinary that is. The outgoing president and supreme Allied commander of World War II was warning you about the Pentagon's power. Today, the U.S. defense budget is over $850 billion a year. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman make billions producing weapon systems the Pentagon sometimes doesn't even want. Congress keeps funding weapons programs that military leaders have tried to cancel because those programs create jobs in swing districts. Politicians get campaign donations from defense contractors. Defense contractors get contracts from politicians. The circle is complete. This isn't a secret. It's publicly documented in lobbying disclosures, campaign finance records, and congressional budgets. It's not a shadowy cabal, it's a system operating in broad daylight that serves itself before it serves the public. Here's a concept that will reframe everything: the revolving door. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The revolving door describes the movement of individuals between government positions and private sector jobs in the same industry they regulated. A defense official leaves the Pentagon and goes to work for Lockheed Martin. A pharmaceutical regulator leaves the FDA and joins Pfizer. A Wall Street regulator leaves the SEC and joins Goldman Sachs. It happens constantly. It is completely legal. Between 2008 and 2018, over 380 senior government officials moved directly to jobs in the defense industry they had previously overseen. Think about the incentives this creates. Why would you aggressively regulate an industry when you know your next job might be inside it? The revolving door doesn't require corruption in the traditional sense. No briefcase of cash, no secret meeting. It just requires officials to understand, consciously or not, that being too aggressive with industry hurts their future career. That's how the deep state actually operates, not through conspiracy, through incentives, through culture, through career paths. Let's zoom in on one specific devastating example: the 2008 financial crisis. In 2008, the U.S. financial system nearly collapsed due to reckless gambling by the biggest banks on Wall Street. Millions of Americans lost their homes, their jobs, their savings. It was the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. The government's response? It bailed out the banks. $700 billion in taxpayer money went to the institutions that caused the crash. Not one senior Wall Street executive went to prison, not one. In Iceland, which had a similar crisis, bankers went to jail. America chose differently. Why? Because the people designing the bailout were former Wall Street executives themselves. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson was the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. Timothy Geithner came from the New York Federal Reserve, deeply embedded in Wall Street culture. These men weren't evil. They weren't corrupt in the cartoonish sense. They just fundamentally believed that what was good for the banks was good for America, and that belief, shared across the permanent financial establishment, shaped a response that saved the system and abandoned the people the system was supposed to serve. That is the deep state in action, no secret handshake required. Now let's talk about something even more fundamental: the power of regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is when the agency created to regulate an industry ends up being controlled by that industry. It sounds abstract. It's not. It's one of the most powerful forces in American political life. The FDA is supposed to protect Americans from unsafe drugs, but it relies heavily on fees paid by the pharmaceutical companies it regulates. The FAA is supposed to ensure aviation safety, but during the Boeing 737 MAX certification, it delegated safety assessments to Boeing's own engineers. Two 737 MAX crashes killed 346 people. Investigations revealed the FAA had been captured by the industry it was supposed to police. The FCC is supposed to regulate telecommunications in the public interest. Former FCC chairs routinely move to telecom industry lobbying jobs. This pattern repeats across virtually every major regulatory agency in Washington. It's not occasional, it's structural. The agencies designed to protect you have been quietly colonized by the industries they're supposed to constrain. And because this happens gradually, institutionally, and legally, it never makes the front page. It just quietly happens. Here's where it gets really interesting, and where the left and right both have legitimate grievances, just about different parts of the same system. When Trump supporters talk about the deep state, they're pointing at something real: intelligence agencies that genuinely did investigate Trump's campaign. The FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane, an investigation into alleged Trump-Russia ties, in July 2016, before the election. The FISA court later found that FBI applications to surveil Trump campaign associate Carter Page contained significant errors and omissions. Inspector General reports documented serious problems with how the investigation was conducted. This is not fake news, it's documented fact. Did the permanent national security establishment view Trump as a threat to their institutional power? Almost certainly yes. Did some officials act in ways that bent the rules to contain him? The evidence suggests, in some cases, yes. But here's the crucial distinction Trump supporters miss. That's institutional self-preservation, not a coordinated coup by lizard people. And here's what Trump's critics miss. Acknowledging FBI overreach doesn't mean Trump was innocent. Both things can be true simultaneously. Now let's flip it, because the deep state that progressives ignore is just as important. When Bernie Sanders tried to reform healthcare in 2016 and 2020, what stopped him wasn't secret agents. It was the insurance lobby, operating completely legally. The pharmaceutical industry spends more on lobbying than any other sector in America, over $370 million in a single year. When Elizabeth Warren pushed for tough Wall Street regulation, she was undermined not by shadowy figures, but by Democratic senators who took Wall Street money. When progressive city councils try to build affordable housing, they get blocked by zoning laws written by and for existing property owners. The deep state doesn't just protect military hawks and intelligence agencies, it protects pharmaceutical profits, real estate wealth, insurance company revenue. It protects whoever has been at the table long enough to write the rules, regardless of which party is nominally in power. The deep state is bipartisan. It serves whoever is already powerful, and it does so through institutions, laws, and incentives, not secret plots. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve, the most powerful, unelected institution in American life. The Fed sets interest rates for the entire U.S. economy. When it raises rates, mortgages get more expensive, businesses cut jobs, recessions can follow. When it cuts rates, borrowing gets cheap, asset prices rise, the stock market booms, the wealthy get wealthier. The Fed is nominally independent, meaning it doesn't answer to the president or Congress on monetary policy decisions. Its chair is appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, and then largely operates beyond political control. The Fed's Board of Governors includes former Wall Street executives. Its regional presidents are literally chosen by the private banks they're supposed to oversee. This institution makes decisions affecting every American's mortgage, savings, and job security, with almost no democratic accountability whatsoever. Is it evil? No. Is it captured by financial interests? Structurally, yes. Is that a problem for democracy? Absolutely. The Federal Reserve is not a conspiracy. It's an institution designed to be insulated from voters, and it is, very successfully. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Does the deep state target presidents? History gives us some genuinely disturbing examples, not of lizard people, but of institutional resistance to elected authority. When JFK tried to pursue back-channel negotiations with the Soviet Union after the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Joint Chiefs were furious. Declassified documents show the CIA withheld information from Kennedy. Some senior officials actively undermined his Cuba policy. When Nixon tried to pursue detente with China, significant parts of the national security establishment resisted. They saw China as an existential enemy. When Jimmy Carter tried to cut the defense budget, the Pentagon bureaucracy fought him at every turn and helped shape a narrative of American weakness. When Obama tried to close Guantanamo Bay, something he promised repeatedly, the Pentagon and intelligence community made it functionally impossible. This is a pattern, not of assassination plots or secret coups, but of institutional resistance to presidents who threaten established power. The deep state doesn't need to kill presidents, it just needs to outlast them, delay them, and quietly make their priorities disappear. Here's perhaps the most important thing I'll say today. The deep state's greatest trick is making you fight about the wrong things. While you argue about whether the deep state is Democrats or Republicans, lizard people or patriots, the actual power structure hums along undisturbed. The defense contractors get their budgets, the pharmaceutical companies keep their pricing power, the banks keep their bailout insurance, the intelligence agencies keep their classification authority, the revolving door keeps spinning, the regulatory capture continues. And you're arguing about whether it's George Soros or the Rothschilds or the Clintons or the globalists pulling the strings. Real power loves nothing more than a population that's looking in the wrong direction. The conspiracy theory version of the deep state is, whether by accident or design, the perfect distraction from the real one. So, what does real accountability look like? Because I'm not going to just leave you with despair. That's cheap content. The good news is, the tools to fight the real deep state are actually available. They're just boring and slow. Freedom of Information Act requests have exposed everything from CIA torture programs to FBI surveillance of civil rights leaders. Investigative journalism, when it's properly funded, has broken open regulatory capture, revolving door corruption, and intelligence overreach. Congressional oversight, when members actually do their jobs instead of performing for cable news, can and does constrain institutional power. Whistleblowers like Snowden, Daniel Ellsberg, and others have fundamentally changed public understanding of what the permanent government actually does. And ballot initiatives that change campaign finance rules, lobbying restrictions, and regulatory structures can shift the incentives that drive the whole system. None of this is as satisfying as believing in a secret cabal you can take down with one election, but it's what actually works. Let me give you a framework. 3 questions to ask every time someone tells you the deep state is doing something. Question 1: who benefits? Follow the money, the contracts, the career paths. Power serves interests. Find the interests. Question 2: is there documentation? Real deep state power leaves paper trails, budgets, lobbying records, revolving door disclosures, inspector general reports. Question 3: does the explanation require secret coordination or just shared interests? Most institutional power doesn't need conspiracy, it just needs alignment. Lockheed Martin and the Pentagon don't need to conspire. They just both benefit from a large defense budget. That's enough. Pharmaceutical companies and the FDA don't need secret meetings. They just both benefit from a slow, industry-friendly regulatory process. That's enough. When you start asking these 3 questions, the real deep state becomes visible, and the conspiracy version starts to look like the distraction it is. Here's my final, honest take on all of this. The people screaming about the deep state the loudest, on both left and right, are usually pointing at the symptoms, not the disease. The disease is structural. It's the natural tendency of institutions, industries, and powerful individuals to protect their own interests at the expense of everyone else. This happens in every country, in every era, in every political system. It's not uniquely American, but America has built some of the most elaborate and well-funded versions of it. The solution isn't to find the right outsider strongman who will smash the system. Every strongman in history has either become the system or been destroyed by it. The solution is slower, harder, and less cinematic. Accountability, transparency, genuine oversight, and a public that understands what they're actually looking at. You don't defeat the deep state with a red pill or a rally. You defeat it with informed citizens who know how power actually works. And right now, too many people know how the fictional deep state works and have no idea how the real one operates. That gap between the story you've been told and the system that actually runs your life, that's the context that's been missing. If this reframed how you think about power and institutions, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you disagree. I genuinely want to know.